Welcome back to me reading Transported, a Wings of Fire story. It's fanfiction. This time, it's chapter 16. As usual, if this is your first time watching this little series, I recommend you to watch the previous chapters or read them yourself. Now, let's begin. Chapter's name is Losing My Mind. Daniel woke from his somewhat of a restful sleep. The smell of cinder had definitely died down a bit. However, there was still a small patch of it lingering in the air somewhere. The sun rose in the horizon, sending waves of light which gleamed into the cavern, illuminating the inside before making its way a double typo. We love them here, making its way to the groggy Skywing's face. Ah. Daniel groaned as he rubbed his crusty eyes. He definitely did not get a good night's sleep, but it would have to do, as he needed to get back to the Jade Winglet. I definitely owe them an apology, Daniel whispered glumly. And an explanation, his thoughts added. He stepped outside the small cavern to an absolute wonder of a morning. The warm glow of the sun greeted his scales from just above the horizon. The fresh aroma of sand and sea salt made its way into his nostrils. He took a deep breath in and out. Daniel sighed gracefully. What a lovely morning. He went over to the ocean border and stared at the surprisingly clear, crystalline water in front of him. It was like staring through a liquid-like glass. He took a handful of seawater and splashed his face with it. Immediately, his grogginess was gone and replaced with a soothing, refreshing sensation. He took a glance at the sky. Some clouds had made their way overhead and would serve their purpose as a cover from the beating heat of the sun later on in the day, especially during his grueling flight back to the cave. If I can even remember which way it was, Daniel thought, the realization of his slight issue at hand hitting him like a bullet. However, Daniel soon ignored the slight worrying butterflies fluttering around in his stomach as he took off into the air above. There wasn't much of a breeze, so unfortunately, Daniel couldn't fly as fast as he hoped. However, the scenery was quite nice. He looked upon the vast, shining desert before him. It was going to be a long journey back to his friends. But do they even see me as a friend anymore? I mean, I literally just flew off into oblivion without a second thought and left them there. Abandoned, Daniel thought aloud. The one thing I promised Winter I wouldn't do. He continued flying for a few minutes in deep silence. His mind was still slightly running with intrusive thoughts and whispers. However, he didn't pay much attention to them. Still flying, there was no sign of the cave. Only the golden glitters of sand scattered across the landscape. Still no sign of anything. Daniel scowled. Did I really fly that far? Daniel pondered. It really didn't seem like that at the time. But then again, it wasn't like he was paying much attention. He was too busy thinking of the voices, whispers, cryptic sayings Daniel finished in his mind. He had no idea what those voices were saying, or even what they meant. He did manage to catch one saying in the bunch. Red wings speak, Daniel repeated in his mind. The whispers mentioned a red wing's peak. Daniel thought, puzzled. Maybe Baron's map could help me. Instinctively, he reached for the area where his little pouch would normally be, only to feel his talon type lightly on his underscales. Oh, right, Daniel remembered. He kept flying. All he could think about was a small bit of cryptic whispers he was able to understand. Red wings peak. It was the only thing he was able to really make out of the voices of his dream? Vision? He didn't know what to make of it, but one thing was for sure. Something about it felt real. He looked down at his talons. The thought of his human body and life came to mind. Wearing branded clothes, playing games silently in his room, reading. He felt a light pain. He felt a light pain of sinus fear. We love these double typos here. We love them. They make us laugh. He felt a light pain of sadness and fear. Fear that he may never return to his home, or that he may possibly die here in Pyrea, since he already come face to face with death beforehand. A picture of the brutal battle between him and Star came into mind. However, what scared him the most wasn't the fact that he may be stuck here, that he may never have a proper home, or that he even might die here, never seeing Earth again. It was the fact that he began to believe that life on Earth was unnatural, and that life as a mystical creature was the way to be. Shut up, Daniel. What are you thinking? Daniel yelled internally. Of course getting back to Earth is the way to be. Look at yourself for your own sake. You're a monster. You don't want to be stuck like this for the rest of your life. His mind was now running, a little with worry and uncertainty. But what if I do? What if I want to stay a dragon? Daniel couldn't think straight. His mind was clouded with thoughts, as two sides of his brain began to argue once again. This world is fake. You're in a book. Yeah, well, it doesn't seem very fake, considering I'm currently living in it. Everyone and everything here is just ink on paper. Get that through your thick skull. Well, they seem to have a consciousness outside of the books. They aren't fake in this world. Daniel, you are a human, not a dragon. Human, you belong on Earth. Well, what if I don't want to be a human anymore? Being a dragon is way cooler. Plus, I can fly and breathe fire. Daniel couldn't stop arguing with himself. On one hand, he knew deep inside that this world was not meant for him, and he needed to return to Earth. That was the whole point of all of this, from the beginning. But after seeing the amazing things he could do as a Skywing, he wasn't sure if he ever wanted to let go of it, even if it meant saying goodbye to Earth forever. Daniel switched his attention to the glittering golden ocean below him as he tried to sound out his intrusive thoughts, which seemed to have rooted themselves into his brain. A headache began to form as the world around him began to spin once again. Daniel struggled to keep his balance in the air, and as such was forced to land on the hot, steaming grains of sand. As his talons touched the ground, he could immediately feel the scorching heat radiating off of the grains of sand below him, across his entire lower body and underscales. Oh, wow, it's hot, Daniel thought, exasperated. Well, of course it is, damn it. Like, I am in the desert for moon's sake. Daniel stopped at his own words. Something was wrong. He wouldn't ever say moons. That's only something dragons would say. Daniel finished out loud. He was losing his mind. It was being twisted. The longer he was in this world, the longer he was in his mythical realm, the more it changed. His heart was thumping against his chest. His breaths were short and shallow. Fear. That's all there was there. There's no question anymore. I need to leave this place. Back at the cave. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon when Star woke from her sleep. She found it surprising that she slept so well. She hadn't slept that deep in moons knows how long. She scanned the area around her. There were multiple dragons still deeply asleep. The burning rocks around her finally died out, and now were nothing but a small patch of crumbled black dust. She looked down at her claws, which were still stained red. It was a miracle that she was still alive. She knew she should have died there, on the sand. She was only still waking because of these dragons' generosity. Even after she had nearly killed one of their friends, they decided to bring her back and decided to also treat her wounds as well. She owed her life to them. Suddenly, she spotted movement from her right and looked out to see one of the dragons awake, staring out at the sunset. It was the Sandwing of the group, the one who always seemed cheerful, even in the worst possible situations. Although, now that she took a closer look at him, she realized that he seemed kinda sad, very far from the normal cheerful dragon he normally was. Did something happen while she was asleep? Slowly, Star got up on her four legs. They were extremely numb, and she started to walk. She managed, however, stepping over the line of charred dust, and made her way over to the sandwink. Keebly turned around at the sound of approaching talon steps to see a strange dragon approaching him. Hi? Star said awkwardly. Hello. Keebly returned to her greeting with the same awkwardness. Some of the morning birds were flying about in the sky. A warm layer of clouds loomed overhead to where they were standing as a bright ray of sunlight illuminated half of their faces. There, they stood there, staring intently at each other for a little while, before a star broke the silence, settling down around them. So, you seemed upset. Star stuttered a little. So I decided to see if you were okay. Are you okay? Keebly eyed her skeptically for a brief moment, before turning his attention back to the sunrise before them, refusing to answer her question. Star stood there, a little annoyed at his silent response, but kept her composure. Nice sunset, Keebly said softly. He didn't feel as talkative today. Last night, he had probably one of the, if not most disturbing dreams of his entire life, and he remembered it very clearly. Keebly awoke. He wanted to apologize to Winter for yesterday's argument, now realizing he was deeply in the wrong, and that if he wanted to stay friends with him, he needed to be the one who apologized, not him. But as he looked around, he found that instead of a gray cave, there was simply nothing. Nothing but blaring silence and cold darkness. A small light shone on him, and it allowed him to see maybe 10-meter radius around him. Anything after that, it was too dark to see through. He was lying down on a cold black stone floor, some bits of white marble poking out here and there. It gave off the illusion that he was walking on nothing, and it was quite unsettling, to say the least. Where am I? He wondered, getting up and scanning the area in order to familiarize his surroundings and find a logical reason to the situation he was in. Usually, he was quite good at breaking things down in order to find solutions, but when there was nothing to break down in the first place, things got a little complicated. Hello? Anyone there? Keebly called out into the foggy void beyond the visible light source around him. He waited a few moments. No response. However, he just couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Someone, or something, was watching him. He pivoted on the spot and attempted to catch his stalker off guard. Although every time he did so, something about the area changed. What looked like strange tentacles made out of dark, foggy matter began to line the floor around him. But what made things worse was the fact that every second he wasn't watching them, they appeared to be moving closer. That's when he heard a voice scream out. A young male voice. Couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Not quite an adult, but soon to be one. Tangent here, but yeah, dragon aging works different than human aging. Okay, so then again, you probably already all know that, unless you're like a rando. But yeah, that's how it works. Not quite an adult, but soon to be one. Help me! The voice cried. The sound was drowned out by the darkness around him, but it was clear that someone, somewhere in front of him, needed help. And he was their only hope. However, he couldn't do anything. Because of the suddenness of the situation, he let his guard down, and a dark tentacle wrapped around his tail, pinning it to the ground. Shoot! Keebly cried internally. HS looked behind him. We love typos here. Looked behind him. The restraint was hooked around his tail and rooted into the ground. He tried clawing at it, only for him to pass right through. It was like trying to cut water. However, This water had a very strong grip. In the background of the chaos, he heard something. Well, it looks like you're in quite the predicament, Keebly. Who said that? Keebly yelled, looking around frantically for the source of the sun's voice. Oh, don't worry about me. You should be more worried about yourself. Show yourself! I think I yelled that a little bit too loud. Show yourself! Keeley snarled as he stared into the darkness beyond, his small bubble of light, in search of any sign of a wind. My, so assertive, the voice laughed. Well, unfortunately, I'm done talking. Now hold still. This will be quite painful. Soon, 3 of the black tentacles appeared. Front of him. We love typos here. They make us laugh. Nothing against the author, but we love typos here. Appeared front of him. 4 more wrapped around his limbs, going around his legs and up around his stomach. What are you doing? Keebley cried desperately. The voice didn't answer him. The tentacles drew closer. He couldn't stop them. He couldn't do anything except watch. Without warning, the tentacles shot forwards. One of him, H-E-M. Oh, we love typos here. One of him shooting into his mouth and down his throat, while the other 2 launched themselves inside both his eyes. Wow. Quite morbid. Keeley couldn't scream. The tentacle in his throat denied it. They squirmed and slithered like snakes inside his body. It was total agony. He felt the life being sucked out of him. He couldn't cry or react in any possible way. He couldn't close his eyes either. His view of what was happening was worse than what he was feeling. The 2 candles felt like sand rolling around his eyes and into his brain system. However, soon began the worst part of them all. The voices, the whispers, circling in his mind like parasites. He couldn't drown them out. It's me. They don't need you. You're better off dead. Kill them. Kill him. An image of a bloodied hurricane appeared in his mind. He wasn't in control anymore. His thoughts had been overrun by the darkness. Keebley muffled a scream. His bite, the tentacle lodged through his mouth and into his stomach. Although he was able to make some noise, it hurt like nothing he had ever felt before. Believe it or not, it was worse than his family constantly abusing him in the scorpion den. Aw, someone not enjoying themselves? That's too bad. I was planning on having so much fun with you. The voice mocked as the tentacles quickly whipped out of Keebley's body. He fell to the ground, the restraints finally letting him go. But he was in too much pain to even take a step forward. An incredibly bad headache had formed, and his eyes felt like they had just been pulled out of their sockets and placed back inside again. He closed his eyes for what felt like the last time, but before he lost consciousness to his pain, he heard one last whisper from the unknown voice. Welcome to my world, Keebley. Hey, are you okay? Star was asked concerningly. He just realized he had been staring at her for moon knows how long. Oh, yeah, I'm all right, Keebley answered a little too quickly. It earned him a skeptical stare from Star, but she didn't question him. I'm going to take a quick fly. Maybe catch some breakfast for us later, Keebley said in an attempt to get out of the conversation. Oh, okay. I'll just chill in my corner, I guess. The name's Star, by the way. She smiled. Keebley stated, reacting with one of his own smiles. It was nice meeting you. I'll be back soon. Keebley took off into the sky. The sun shone on him as he try to mimic. We love typos here. They make us laugh. The sun shone on him as he tried to mimic some of Hurricane's flying tricks, of which he completely failed. Keeley tried to do one of Hurricane's tricks where he would fly upside down next to the floor, although he failed miserably, since he wasn't able to keep his balance and nearly crashed headfirst into the sand below. He was able to quickly recover and flipped right side up, and was in a decent position when he did end up crashing into a sand dune. Luckily, he was just fine. Getting up, he noticed there was a small lizard next to a patch of... Wait, what? There was a small lizard next to... That doesn't... I'm just gonna think it's a typo. Next to a patch of cacti. Well, I guess I found my breakfast, Keebley thought happily. He was still a bit shook from his recent nightmare. However, he did have to admit that Star had managed to comfort him a little. Huh. Kind of like Hurricane, Keebley said, his face heating up very slightly. The more he thought of the bright, red, handsome... Whoa! Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, Keebley, he said to himself. You don't even know if he likes you back. Plus, there's also winter to think about. Keebley was caught up in his thoughts. He shook his head in an attempt to drown them out. That won't work. A voice suddenly spoke to him. Keebley's eyes shot open. He didn't just hear a voice, did he? No, he couldn't have. He was awake after all, and it was just a dream. Keebley peered around at the landscape. Nothing suspicious. Keebley started. That was until a black blur whipped past his peripheral vision. He turned quickly in a hope to catch his stalker, only to find nothing. Nothing but a small tumbleweed rolling away from him in the distance. Nobody's here, Keebley. Or maybe there is. Who knows? The voice repeated in his head, just as more shadows jumped around in Keebley's peripheral vision. However, as soon as he turned, there was nothing there. Quiet, echoing laughter could be heard all around him, as if he was surrounded by little dragonettes. However, he was all alone. Yet the laughing didn't stop. It only got louder, louder and louder. Keebley's world began to spin, and as he looked around, the world began to shift and flicker different colors. First, the sky, then the sand, and before he knew it, his own scales too. Each passing second, the world would become more distorted, almost as if it was breaking, cracking, glitching. Yet the laughing didn't stop. Keebley couldn't take it anymore. What do you want from me? Keebley cried out, uncontrollable, tears seeping out of his eyes. Covering his ears, he tried to silence the sound, to no luck. He closed his eyes and screamed the loudest he'd ever screamed before. He was sure the whole of Pyrea would hear him. Suddenly, the laughing stopped. Keebley was scared to open his eyes, but he did so anyway. He looked up. A mix of surprise, fear, and uncertainty loomed over him. He was no longer in the middle of the desert anymore. He was now in the scorpion den. It was now the middle of the night. Or, that's what it looked like. Keebley didn't know what to believe anymore. One second, he was just going to get some breakfast for the rest of the group. The next, he didn't know how to explain it. But he's somehow in the scorpion den, late at night, and it was pouring down with rain. For some reason, he was wearing a dark black cloak, kind of like the ones his family wore on assassinations. However, instead of just covering his face and a bit of his back, it covered his entire body. You wouldn't have been able to know what kind of dragon he was with a cloak of this demeanor. The town he grew up in hadn't changed much since he last left. With Queen Thorn to the palace, he left his grandfather, Vulture, in charge of the place. However, as such, he saw it seemed a little more dangerous than usual, a little more dangerous the usual. Hold on a second. Vulture in charge of the palace. However, and as such, he saw it seemed a little more dangerous the usual. No, that doesn't make sense. That's another typo. We love typos here. They make us laugh. Dangerous, the usual. Suddenly, he heard crying from behind him. Keebly expected to see nothing, or some wild, out of this worldly being based on what had just happened. However, nothing could have pretended him. Nothing could have prepared him for the reality of what he saw. Two dragons were knelt down on the ground, surrounding a larger sandwing. They both had dragon skull tattoos on their necks, and it was a dead giveaway to who they were. It was the siblings. Sergio? Sirocco? Sirocco. I've never read the books, so I don't know who these guys are. So I'm going to butcher their names, or butcher that name. The next one's easy. Sirocco and Rattlesnake. They both were wearing the family's signature black hoods around their necks. As Keebly took a closer look, he realized that they were both crying. Now, this got his attention instantly, as he had never seen them cry before, not even after they came back to the house, broken and bloodied from the occasional street fight. "How could you do this?" Rattlesnake screamed as she held the hand of the collapsed dragon. "How could you kill her? Sure, she wasn't the greatest dragon, but that's no reason to..." Sirocco sobbed sadly, tilting his head downwards. Keebly took a step forward. He had gotten over the fear of the siblings a while back, and for a very long time didn't feel anything for them. But seeing them so upset, it scared him, and worst of all, made him feel sympathy for them. Keebly shook his head. He didn't know how to respond to this. For years, he had always had constant thoughts, words, and ideas running through and out of his mouth and mind. But for the first time, in what felt like years, he was truly speechless. Taking another step towards them, he eyed the dragon they were cradling with such emotion. His eyes widened when he finally saw who it was. His mother, Cobra, was on the ground, cold, lifeless. A large gash pierced her neck from one side to the other. No doubt, she was killed by a blade. Someone had managed to assassinate her. Suddenly, screaming was heard in the distance. Keebly turned around, only to find large, raging fires engulfing the town. Dragons took to the sky in an attempt to escape the chaos. In the distance, Keebly spotted his grandfather, Vulture. Unmistakable dragon skull tattoos lined the older sandwing scales. In front of them was another dragon. He was wearing a cloak, almost identical to the one Keebly had on as well. The mysterious dragon was clutching what was a weapon Keebly had never seen before. It was a compact metal rod with what appeared to be a hooked blade towards the end of it. A large ring could be seen at the bottom of the handle, looped around one of the hooded dragon's claws. Soon, however, the hooded dragon turned to stare at Keebly. A large, maniac smile crept across the dragon's face. He couldn't tell who it was, due to the cloak they were wearing, but he couldn't find out. As soon the fires around him blocked the line of sight between them. The raging fires burned Keebly's scales on his neck as he fell back on the sandy and stony footpath. Keebly began to breathe fast and heavy, hyperventilating almost. "No, this isn't real," Keebly whispered softly. He knew his mother wasn't dead. She was the greatest assassin he knew. There's no way someone could have killed her. And he refused to believe that the scorpion den was on fire. Tears began to form again. However, remembering what just happened to him some minutes ago, he held them back. His neck was burned severely. It was in a good amount of pain, and Keebly knew it was going to leave a scar. "No, this can't be real. It's fake. My mother's alive and well. Some puny assassin couldn't have killed her," Keebly said sternly. The image of the hooded dragon came to mind. Something about them looked familiar, but he couldn't just put his claw on it. The voice in his head returned. Smarter than the average dragon, I see." The voice in his head replied slyly. "Yeah, I know my mother isn't dead." Keebley started. However, he was interrupted by the voice. "Oh, no, 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 no," the voice chuckled. "I mean, that you're right about some assassin not being able to kill her." "I know my mother. She's not dead," Keebley yelled, his heart rate picking up again, now uncertain of what was actually happening, as a crackling of fire whipped around him. "I'm Surely? Sure. Surely? I'll show you the future, not the present. All of this is very real." "I'll show you the future, not the present. All of this is very real." "What proof do you have this is real, let alone it's the future?" Keebley didn't believe the voice for a second. "Believe what you want. You'll find out soon enough that I was only trying to warn you. Check your arm. I'm sure it will explain a lot," the voice said. "Think of it as a parting gift." A sudden louder sound echoed inside his mind, and he didn't know how to explain it. The best he could do was relate to it in a very distorted and slowed whistle. Keebley didn't understand what the voice was talking about, but he wasn't able to communicate with it anymore. It seemed that the voice had decided to leave his head, for now at least. He turned his attention to his arm. Not sure. His arm? Dragons are quadrupeds, so they got forelegs and they got hind legs. They don't got arms. The only limbs they got are legs, a tail, and two wings. And yeah, you know what I mean. They don't got arms. So his foreleg, it'd make more sense if it was his foreleg. Anyway, back to the read. He turned his attention to his arm, not sure if he should actually trust the random voice that was in his head, which was definitely not his, although curiosity got the better of him. He unwrapped the cloak from his right arm to find a unique device strapped onto it. It was a compact, fully black metal. We found another typo. We love typos here. They make us laugh. It was a compact, fully black metal rectangular compartment with leather straps circling his arm, keeping it in place. However, as he studied it more, he saw what looked like a small black button near the top of the device. Cautiously, he pressed the button with his claw. There was a small click before what appeared object. Before what appeared object shot out of the device, and sure, we'll roll with that. Shot out of the device, and the sound made Keebley jump a little before he stared back at it to see what happened. His heart skipped a beat. A large, sharp blade, maybe about 8 inches, was locked in place under his arm. It was a hidden blade, perfect for assassinations. I love Assassin's Creed references. I'm saying this without a hint of sarcasm. I'm lying. Sure. I mean, what fanfiction doesn't have self-inserts? It's kind of obvious that we read it. We roll with it. We think it's funny, and we move on. It was a hidden blade, perfect for assassinations. He went it take a glance. Wait, what? He went it take. We love typos here. We love them. They make us laugh. He went it take a glance at his siblings and dead mother, only to find himself staring back at the cave that he was in to begin with. The night sky had somehow turned into the bright morning without him noticing, and he was still wearing the black cloak around his body. However, he was terrified, and it wasn't the fact that a random deadly weapon had just suddenly appeared on his arm that made him so scared, or the fact that some random magical voodoo voice had just messed up his mind. No, it was the fact that this was proof that it was right. What he saw, it was real. It had to be. How else would a very real weapon and a very real cloak suddenly appear on his body if the place he was in wasn't real to begin with? Then that meant his mother was actually dead, or would be soon. His eyes began to tear up a bit. Someone really had managed to kill her, or would at least. He took one look at the blade attached to his arm. However, this time he was surprised, and not in the good way. His eyes went wide as he studied the blade under his arm closely. It was too dark to see any detail of color of the blade. Back when he was in his dream, or whatever it was. However, now that he saw the blade in the daylight, he realized the truth of the matter. He knew why his mother was dead. He knew why his siblings were screaming such odd remarks at him. He knew the blade in his hand. It wasn't gray. It was stained red to the hilt. His mother was dead because he was the one who killed her. And that is the end of the chapter. Besides our usual author gracing his presence, or gracing us with his presence in the form of an author note at the very bottom. Hello, people. I'm not dead. I'm back with another chapter, and I'm officially starting to build on the climax and the official antagonist of the story. This chapter was mainly from Keebly's point of view. You're welcome, Keebly fangirls and fanboys. Not me, because, well, I never read the books, or never read the later books. And I hoped it added a little plot to the story. From now on, unfortunately, updates will be a lot slower, since I have a lot of things to do. Now, plus internals, so that sucks. But I'll try and get another chapter out as soon as I can. But until then, take care of yourselves. So, the big bad has been introduced, and is fucking with Daniel's gaggle fuck of a group and their minds. And it gave Keebly a weapon, an Assassin's Creed weapon, a funny Assassin's Creed reference, and a black cloak. And has shown her a vision of what seems to be the future of her killing her own mother. Kind of morbid and dark, but hey, you gotta set up the big bad somehow. And yeah, I think that's it for now. See you next time.